Welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series, your resource for the latest news and updates on pressing issues facing the accounting profession.
Good afternoon and welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series. We've got a great show for you today. It's one of those sprint weeks. There's a lot going on. So let me just cover real quickly what we'll be reviewing. We're going to kick it off with an economic outlook from the former CNBC chief economist, Marcy Russell. Wow, what a first quarter we've had, and she'll be sharing where she thinks things are going. We're then just going to briefly talk about what's happening in DC, and then really get into what's happening with PPP, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund program, and some of the other business relief updates, as well as talk about a couple of critical tax items. But we'll be closing this with a probably 15 to 20 minute practitioner discussion related to how they're managing these different business relief programs. So let's get right into it. I'm first just going to introduce our opening presenters. With me is Michael Cerami, and many of you know him. He's going to be interviewing Marcy Russell, and you all know Lisa Simpson real well. So with that, Michael and Marcy, please come on up, and I can't wait for this discussion. So welcome.
Hey, thanks, Eric, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to be joined today by Marcy Russell. Some of you may recognize Marcy. She was formerly chief economist for CNBC and host of Squawk Box. Marcy has been an invaluable resource to us throughout this crisis and a frequent contributor to many of our events this past year. Marcy, it's great to see you again, and very excited you could join us today.
Thanks so much, Michael. It's great to be here.
Well, good. Well, let's go ahead and jump right in, Marcy. You know, it's been a painful year on so many levels. In particular, many of the folks on this broadcast have endured the past 13 or 14 months from what I like to refer to as kind of the small business front lines. I mean, truly, they have been the financial first responders of this crisis. However, while I hesitate to say it out loud, it does seem the worst maybe behind us, at least here in the U.S. Vaccinations are flowing, more reopenings are being announced every day. Travel seems to be picking up. And then just last week, we had JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs issue pretty rosy outlooks, well into 2022. So I want to start off with a two-part question for you regarding the economic forecast. One is, how long and how strong do you believe the economic recovery is going to be? And then, is there really anything in our nation's history that you can point to as a benchmark for recovering from a crisis such as this?
Well, Michael, if you know me and have heard me talk before, I always like to ground things historically. So one of the things that I always do when I'm talking about recessions and recoveries is sort of point out, hey, this was just like back during the dot-com boom and bust, or this was like during the Great Recession when we had a housing boom and bust, or even like the 1970s when we had cyclical behavior that was being driven by the OPEC cartels and the oil embargoes. I got to tell you, this is like none of that. We really haven't seen anything like it. And you might say to yourself, well, what about the recovery from the Second World War, where you saw a real boost in economic activity? What about the 1920s that in some ways were a recovery from the last big pandemic the world experienced in 1918 and 1919? The main difference this time around is that the composition of the global economy is so very different than it was in 1918 and in 1950. So in 1918, we were primarily an agriculturally based economy. So that was what drove GDP. Back in the 1950s, we were a manufacturing based economy. And so it was manufacturing that drove GDP. Well, now we're in the service sector primarily, and technology is what's driving GDP. So this makes it very, very different this time around, because just to put the numbers in perspective, last year, the U.S. economy shrank by about 3%. So, of course, there was that ginormous decline in March, April, and May that was sort of the result of governments mandatorily shutting things down. Things were slow in the first half of the year, but the second half of the year, we already saw a recovery of sorts take hold. So that by the fourth quarter of last year, the US economy was growing at an annualized rate of about 4%. Now we know that in the last quarter, the first quarter of this year, the US economy grew at an annualized rate of over 6%. And so now everybody's saying, well, where do we go from here? We're already back to the same level of GDP, about 22 trillion, that we had prior to the pandemic. So in some ways, we're talking about a recovery that's already well underway. Now, even though we've all still been sort of constrained, and some of us are starting to feel unconstrained, myself included, because we've been vaccinated, and there's this other thing out there that I think will drive a tremendous amount of economic activity in the second half of this year, and it's all that pent up savings. So if you look at the GDP report, the latest one that came out, the savings rate in the first quarter of this year was a full 20%. That's $5 trillion worth of savings just this past quarter. Pile that on top of what was saved all of last year, and there's excess savings right now that is to the tune of about 5% of total GDP that's basically just sitting on the sidelines. This is going to drive a tremendous amount of economic activity over the second half of this year. I don't think we'll go back to seeing trend rate of growth, which is about 2 to 3% until 2022. But one more thing that we have to keep in mind. There are some changes that have taken hold in the COVID economy that will be permanent. And they're going to change the scenario, sort of what we see in the future forever. That there were some temporary things that happened, but there were some permanent things too. And so, Michael, I don't think we can use history this time around to really give us any kind of guidepost. You know, we talk about V-shaped recoveries and Y-shape and all those things historically. This is going to be a fireworks recovery in the second half of this year, and it's already begun.
And so, Marcy, picking up on that, how about a lot of anxiety on the debt load, inflation? Where do you see that factoring in?
Well, the inflation is going to come because of that explosive growth, right? Inflation is going to be the noise of the fireworks. You're going to see a tremendous amount of stress on the supply side in many, many markets as things sort of try to get back to normal. We're already seeing it in semiconductors, big shortages there in the post-COVID environment. That's rolling over into shortages in the automobile industry. We're seeing shortages on the construction side of things. Everybody out there who's done any kind of home repair project knows the price of lumber has doubled, tripled, quadrupled in some cases. So you're going to see what I would call a temporary surge in inflation. Again, it's already underway. If you look at the numbers in the first quarter GDP report, the price indices in the last GDP report, they were up 3%. Well, we're accustomed to something between 1% and 2%. So you're already 100 basis points above a normal inflation rate. I think much of that continues into the second half of this year. So this is going to be a high inflation year. And what the Federal Reserve is going to have to figure out is it a permanent change in inflation or is it a temporary change in inflation? I'm on the side of we're simply going to have to wait and see. And I think the Federal Reserve, despite what Janet Yellen mentioned this past week about we might see some higher interest rates, I do believe she was really talking about higher interest rates in the bond market, but not the interest rates that the Federal Reserve controls. I think that they will err on the side of loose monetary policy because there was no inflation prior to this. So they can live with some 3%, maybe even 4% inflation. Now, what does that mean for the deficit? Well, if you do see higher interest rates begin to sort of creep up on the long end and it becomes really expensive to service the enormous amount of debt that we have incurred due to COVID-19 and the government's response, maybe at that point, our representatives will get serious about balancing the budget because in the midst of explosive growth, like we're going to see in the second half of this year, you're going to see tax revenues pick back up. All of that natural recovery is going to help the government's finances. And I also believe, though, that you're going to begin to see some pressure from interest rates that will force them to come to the table and balance the budget post-COVID, right? So what we did during COVID, it's behind us, it's done. Once the economy recovers, it's going to be much easier for Congress, Senate, the president to balance a budget, because we're going to see strong growth numbers. It is possible.
It's great, Marcy. You know, one of the points you made, again, there's really no playbook for this time around. Yeah, I'm curious. One of the things we've been talking about is that really what's happened, you know, in the past year is you just had a tremendous acceleration of trends that were already in place, already in motion. I don't know. Fast forward maybe a decade or so from now, when people look back, what do you think is going to have been the greatest long-term business impact from this crisis?
Sure. Well, there was a wonderful working paper just recently released by the University of Chicago. So, of course, I love their stuff. And they released a working paper on how the flexibility in work arrangements. So I'm going to be careful and not call it work from home, because it's really work from anywhere. They believe that going forward, on average, workers, instead of working 5% of their time from home, are probably going to work more like 20% of their time from home. Now, that's an average, right? So some people more, some people less. But that increase from 5 to 20% post-COVID means that productivity, because you don't have commuting time, is likely to increase somewhere, you know, the estimates aren't sure, maybe anywhere from 2 to 6%. So that's a permanent increase in worker productivity, which translates into permanent compounding increases in GDP year in and year out. You know, policymakers have been desperate to find anything that will sort of lift the U.S. economy out of our sort of low productivity, demographically induced 2% growth. The movement of everybody to the great work from home experiment, where we all sort of collectively embraced it, means that something that was sort of everybody wasn't sure about, how could it work? We've all made the investment now. We've bought our Zoom cameras. We've bought our better computers. We've figured out how to do this. You and I, instead of talking on a stage, are talking via Zoom, and we're all comfortable with it now. That investment that we all made to adjust, many of you out there who are listening we're so flexible in your ability to move your operations, move your offices, move your staff to something virtual, and just keep right on going. That investment means that we will see permanently higher productivity. So normally, if the trend works like this, you're going to see the trend line basically, instead of looking like this, go like this. And I think the history books will look very kindly on that being, you know, I don't want to say that there's any silver lining in any of the death and destruction that we've experienced. But when we look back at the economic effects of all this, the work from home trend, the work from anywhere trend will improve U.S. productivity going forward. And I think economically, that's the biggest effect. But I want to draw your attention to something else. For those of you who are in leadership positions, who deal with, you know, if you're in a small firm, your leadership, your HR, your CEO, your everything, right? Your teams will be constructed of people who are under the age of 35, who have a very different economic point of view. So for me, I'm straight up Gen Xer. I know there are some younger baby boomers out there, and we all experienced an economy that was very, very benign up until the 2000s. So we experienced the boom of the 1990s. We experienced all that enthusiasm around the fall of the Berlin Wall in the late 80s, early 90s. And so we have a very different economic experience than millennials and generations past who have experienced September 11th, the financial crisis of 2008, and now this pandemic. They're going to be much more risk averse and have a very different view of how risky the world can be. And that's something to take into account, I think, when you're managing your teams. I think it's an important point of view. It's sort of one of those long-term things that will be with us for a very long time.
That's great. Sounds like we may have a lot of CPAs that are graduating from this the last 10 or so years based on that, Marcy. Marcy, talk about, again, we've gone back and forth. World's moving more toward globalization. It seems most recently deglobalization. Maybe just comment on that and the impact you think it's going to have economically in the near term.
Well, I think the deglobalization push really comes around the understanding that our supply chains are much more vulnerable to threat than we ever realized. And I think the shortage of PPP equipment early in the pandemic foreshadowed the current shortage of semiconductors, where the world is realizing that in moving to what is undoubtedly the most efficient under the best case scenario circumstances, where one country, one region, produces what it produces best and then exports it to the rest of the world, sort of that Ricardian view of trade that for those of you who sat through international trade economics classes, you know very well the argument in favor of free trade, specialization, all these things. The downside is when you have these black swan events like a pandemic, where we realize our supply chains are very vulnerable to disruption. And I'll call your attention to what's going on right now between China and Taiwan. China is making noise and around sort of Taiwan's independence. Well, Taiwan has one of the 3 companies in the world that make semiconductors. And so geopolitics interacting with economics, and suddenly we're looking and going, okay, perhaps our semiconductor supply chains are far more vulnerable to disruption than we realized. And so I don't want to call it deglobalization. I would rather it be a reassessment of risk around supply chains. And I think that's going to be sort of in the next 10 years, something companies really look into and consider, because pandemics and the aftermath of pandemics are exposing to us just how vulnerable we can be to those sorts of things. And they don't have to do, or they're divorced in some way from the most efficient economic outcome. Sometimes what's efficient politically and what's efficient economically, and I'm the economist, but I can say sometimes they're 2 very different things.
Yeah, fair point, Marcy. And maybe in our last minute here, Marcy, I'll throw one final question to you. As you know, many tuned in here again are the most trusted advisor to small and mid-sized business America. So what parting comment, what would you highlight or ask them to highlight to their small and mid-sized business clients from an economic standpoint?
Well, if their small and mid-sized clients have survived all of this, it is remarkable how resilient they are. And I think people have to be reminded of that over and over again. The worst is firmly behind us. And what you're going to see over the next year, in some ways, is a mirror image of what we saw in March, April, and May, when the economy literally imploded on itself. You're going to see this explosive growth, and you're going to scramble for talent. Everybody's going to be dealing with exactly the opposite issues. It didn't get any easier for small business. It actually got much harder. But I will say, from a competitive point of view, we know that the number of small businesses in the US is down by 37%. So if you're a small business who has managed to survive, the competitive landscape is actually better for you. It's just going to be a different set of challenges going forward.
Marcy, you got to promise us you'll come back. You always offer up great insight.
Ask me.
We will definitely, you'll definitely be making another town hall appearance, and thank you for kind of ending things on a positive note. It's always great to have you. And Eric, back to you.
Yeah, and we'll just stay on for one more second, Michael and Marcy. That was fantastic. And this community here, they played a huge role with the PPP program, getting loans out to those 8 million businesses. They've helped a lot of other business relief activities. But I thank you for being with us today. And we're going to have more of these fireside chats, just letting everybody know we're going to bring more of the leaders of the economic, business, and profession to come talk on our town hall. So thanks again, Marcy. And we definitely look forward to having you back. And Michael, thanks for that session.
Thank you.
So with that, I'd like to bring Lisa back up, and we're going to go back into PowerPoint mode here and talk through a couple of items. We're going to first just show our slide that we've showed so many times. It is a sprint week. Lisa and I have been on calls with lenders and some government officials in the firms, and we're going to share with you right now the best available information that we have. Mark and Barry have the week off here, so just real quickly, we will be talking more about what's happening in DC when Barry Melanson joins us in 2 weeks. But you're reading in the newspapers. There's all kinds of discussions related to the infrastructure and tax package. And the question is it going to be a bipartisan, hard infrastructure plan, which would be a smaller package if it's bipartisan? The Republicans are offering a smaller infrastructure plan than the Biden administration is proposing. And then there's discussions about just a hard partisan play by the Democrats, either doing it in 2 bites, an infrastructure plan, and then this families plan, which will include a tax package, are doing it all together. We have plenty of time to discuss this. It's going to be, progressing over the next few weeks and couple of months. So more about that in a future town hall. But Lisa, let's get into the relief program news. You see here a lot in the press about what happened with PPP over the last couple of days. We're going to unpack that, and we'll talk a little bit about where the Restaurant Revitalization Fund stands. But first off, PPP. So there's a lot of information on this slide. Let's start just with the chart on the right. This was as of Sunday, May 2nd. This is what the SBA released. This showed that potentially there was still $30 billion in funding. It shows the top lenders, our partner, Atria Ventures, Biz2Credit, on that list. But then came Monday, and even on Monday, everyone thought there was still $20 billion left in the PPP program. Tuesday morning, actually, the SBA sent out a tweet saying, still take advantage of this program. And then Tuesday afternoon, the SBA announced that the general fund had been exhausted. So there was no more money in the general PPP fund. The only remaining money is available through community financial institutions. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So there's about $8 billion still available for those CFIs. That's the acronym CFIs. The SBA also put some dollars aside for these applications that have error codes. They've been accepted by the SBA, but they have error codes. So what does this mean? All non-CFI lenders are not accepting new applications. So I think you've all seen that. JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Biz2Credit, our program, which was just supporting firms, is no longer taking new applications. And I'll bring Lisa in after I just clear this for some comments. So a little bit about what is a community financial institution. That's a category. It's a category based on the Economic Aid Act. It includes community development financial institutions, minority depository institutions, community development corporations, and micro lenders. There's over a few thousand of these different lenders. Some of them are credit unions, and you can get links to these different groups by downloading this material and clicking on those links, the CDFI link and the MDI links. So there is ways to find out who they are. And why do they still have money? Back in January of 2021, the SBA put aside $15 billion for CFIs, and there's still $8 billion remaining. So what you can do here with your clients is you can offer them that path if they still are looking to get a PPP loan. So Lisa, I'll talk a little bit more about this slide, but you're close to this. You're talking to a lot of firms. Your perspective.
Well, I think it's important to manage expectations, which is a lot of what we've talked about this year. In talking with lenders today, those CFIs are very small institutions generally. They probably don't have hundreds of people ready to answer the phone and ready to work through PPP loan applications. So if you're talking to your clients about it, I think you need to set an expectation that it may or may not be a viable alternative at this point.
And we're going to talk to the two practitioners about this in our panel discussion. But basically, applications fall into three categories. You've got an application that could not get successfully submitted to the SBA. Maybe they haven't finished it, or they've applied and the lender couldn't get it in. Those are going to have to now leverage the CFI avenue. And as Lisa said, there's going to be a lot of volume now being pushed at these CFIs. Secondly, if your application is in the SBA, it's on hold, they put dollars aside, your existing lender should be able to continue to work with the borrower on that. No guarantees, though, that they'll be able to get an E-Tran. And finally, if you've got an E-Tran number, that money's set aside. Just make sure your client gets the documents into the borrower, into the lender, and the lender should be able to complete that process. So, Lisa, we keep it moving here, but just what would you like to cover on the forgiveness stats?
Really quickly on forgiveness, we can see that they're progressing, but it's still pretty slow. We expect that to pick up, as we've talked about. Once the application for loans is approved, then they'll pivot to forgiveness. Still get questions about are loans being forgiven at the SBA within the 90 days, and the answer is no. So you're not alone if it's still sitting out there. You're not alone if you are getting multiple requests for information, because the SBA is outsourcing a lot of this forgiveness work. So you may be asked to provide a lot of details. On the conversation that we've been having with you around simplifying forgiveness for loans between $150,000 and $2 million, it's our understanding those conversations are ongoing within the SBA. The latest word is optimistic that something will happen, but no concrete timeline. It's been floated. It could be late May, early June, but again, there are no guarantees on that.
So, and this will absolutely be picking up, and I think firms need to think about their strategies. What is your strategy related to forgiveness? So more to come on that.
Yeah, we'll talk quite a bit about that. Before we dive into PPP and SVOG, I wanted to hit a couple of tax items. And the first one, you've got a tax credit that was announced for employees, for an employer who's giving time off to employees to either get a vaccine or recover from the vaccine. It's for small employers. You've got a link there to the fact sheet, so I'd encourage you to check that out to get familiar with the details. Then we've got another IRS notice that came out that basically provides a safe harbor if a PPP borrower filed their tax return prior to December 27, 2020, so prior to the Economic Aid Act, and they didn't deduct their PPP expenses, they can choose to deduct those on their next tax return. So again, you've got the details there. There are still some big items that we're waiting on some guidance from IRS and Treasury for. So I wanted to bring those up, let you know that we are having ongoing conversations with Treasury around the urgent need for guidance on some of those pressing ERC questions. So what's included in gross receipts, and are shareholders and their spouses eligible for ERC? So those are a couple of our big unknowns around ERC. Also waiting for guidance around how to report these PPP loan forgiveness processes on flow-through entities. We are talking with the Treasury officials around these issues. They know it's on their radar, and we've been told that they're working on them and that hopefully they'll be issuing guidance soon. So more to follow. All right, quickly, let's move on into our business relief options other than ERC. I've added the supplemental targeted EIDL advance to our list, and it's not that it's new, it's just that I wanted to make sure that you call it out. This is very restrictive, and you'll see the details if you click on that link. It's for very small borrowers who were hardest hit by the pandemic. They can get an up to $5,000 additional emergency advance. We're going to talk about strategy with our great practitioners, so we'll skip on into Restaurant Fund. It was a big week for the Restaurant Revitalization Program. 2 weeks ago, we did a deep dive on it, and we thought that the program would be rolling out in May. We just didn't know it would be this early in May. So it's good news for this segment of the economy that's been so hard hit. They've had about 186,000 applications go through the process in the first 2 days. There was a minor hiccup, but it seems to, from most accounts, it seems to have gone fairly well. So that's great news. The goal that the SBA has stated is that applications will be funded in about 14 days on average. But as a reminder, there are certain set-aside periods for very small institutions, veteran-owned, women-owned, minority-owned. So they get priority funding. If your client or if you have not applied yet, do it. Get your application in the queue while it remains open, because again, this money will go quickly. As a very quick note, we had gotten some questions from CPAs whose clients had looked at the preferred documentation request on one of the particular categories. So for new-ish entities, the SBA was looking for a comfort letter. We've explained to the SBA that comfort letters aren't really a thing, and that we have professional standards that limit the use of when a CPA could provide verification like that. I've given you a link to a Journal of Accountancy article and an Understanding the Program resource where we talk about those comfort letters. They are not required. Do not have your client hold up just to get a comfort letter that you may or may not be able to provide without doing additional work. So then we'll talk about the Shutter Venue Grant, which reopened on the 26th. It seems to be going fairly well as well. 17,000 applicants, so a lot smaller population. Again, the SBA has said they hope to be distributing the money late May. So if your clients have applied for that, you've got a little bit of information there to give them. And this is the chart that you guys are growing to know and love, just showing the complexity of the interplay between all of these applications. I've given you a link to the SBA site, which is the source for this. And just keep this handy as you're talking to your clients, put it on your website, put it in your newsletter. But I think this is a great tee up to bring in our practitioners who are navigating the interplay of all of these programs and having the conversations with their clients. So with that, we've got Dixie McCurley, who's been on several town halls, and Travis Miskowitz, who's also joined us in the past. So welcome, you guys. It's great to have you back.
Thanks, Lisa. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, welcome. So we're gonna get right into it. You guys are veterans. You were with us in town halls back in April, and you've been on a couple since then. So we're gonna talk about these four items here. You know, it's a little bit of like a boggle game or something. So we can drop the slides and let's go into discussion format. So kicking it off with you, Travis. I think when you woke up on Tuesday morning, you didn't think, okay, I'm coming to work and the money's going to run out of PPP. I'll tell you this. I mean, we know the people that who are the closest to the information sources. The SBA didn't know, I don't think, till the afternoon. They did the math and they said, oh, we're out of money. So how did you manage this with your clients? You've been active all year, 2020 and 2021. So how did you set expectations up in advance, and what have you done over the past couple of days?
Yeah, I think, I was just as surprised as you, Eric, when I checked the slide on Sunday and I saw the $30 billion available, and Tuesday morning, we're out of funds. So I think we've been preaching patience throughout the process this year. PPP this year was certainly a lot different compared to last year. Many more verification checks, a lot more due diligence and underwriting on the side of lenders. So we were advising clients 12 to 14 business days from application to approval. We were advising clients that funds have been running low for the last few weeks. It's time to get your applications in, make sure your documentation is accurate, make sure you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's before you submit your application to the lender. Really make it as easy and simple as possible as you can for the lender to process your application as quickly as possible. And I think we're fortunate that we had a few very late submissions. We made it very clear that it's entirely possible your loan won't be approved and be assigned an E-Tran number before the fund runs out of money. So we had 3 smaller applications where we're now going through the process of trying to locate a CFI and then see if we can get those loans approved.
Well, just Dixie, I'm going to come to you quickly with a forgiveness question, but I'm going to ask it for Travis first. So, you're beginning to think about forgiveness? I know you and I were talking earlier today, and you said some of your clients are being approached by this whole new category. It's kind of like the R&D tax credit category, a forgiveness category, where people are saying, "I'll do your forgiveness for a percentage of the forgiven amount."
Yeah, we're seeing some clients use these third-party consultants where they're charging a percentage of the amount forgiven, and so we're trying to get in front of clients as best as we can. We've sent out a number of blogs, a number of email blasts and newsletters. While the forgiveness application is complex and there's many variables, and we do have a number of subject matter experts on the team that have been following the program since inception, it's an area where I think CPAs and CPA firms can really step up and provide that assistance to their clients, so they're not being taken advantage of by some of these consultants.
Yeah, it's concerning. I mean, you said someone charging $10,000 or $20,000 to do a forgiveness application, and we'll in a minute we'll get to ERTC and what some people are doing there. So Dixie, maybe your perspective, just kind of where you stood with your clients on Tuesday with the PPP process and how you're thinking about forgiveness.
Well, we expected it, and especially from your guidance, Eric. I mean, months ago, you were saying by April 11th, even though the program may be open until May 31st, funds were going to run out. So we definitely wanted all clients to get in as quickly as possible, get great documentation so that it could run through smoothly. Inevitably, there were some stragglers and some things changed, and clients didn't know whether or not they were eligible. So we got a few of those late ones in as well, and tried to get almost every one of them funded before the program closed. So with that, we're now focused on forgiveness, and we're allowing clients to either do it themselves or allow us to help. We're not there to take advantage of clients by charging them those astronomical fees like Travis mentioned some other firms are doing, but the one thing is that it is complicated. So as usual, as we saw with the very beginning of the PPP-1 last year, all the way to this year, clients will try it and they go, you know what, I don't have the time to spend 2 to 3 hours to do this, plus all the documentation. We had it all, and it's easy for us to do the forgiveness. So we're working on the forgiveness piece to that, and having a tool. The business relief lending tool helped. We're only helping those clients with forgiveness of the ones that we help prepare the PPP. So that's simplified our process quite a bit.
And you're doing your value billing approach. I know you had 3 different tiers way back in 2020, but what is your strategy on value billing?
Yes, definitely. We have a fixed fee price for it. It does also matter how complicated the business is. So if they had multiple entities, we were giving a little bit of discount on that. But that value billing piece, they didn't need as much in terms of the cash flow forecasting on it. They need help with these new programs. So if we did the PPP already, they got a discount on the forgiveness. And then we're looking at the new RRF and how we include that. That's a lot easier to do once you've already got all the PPP stuff.
Well, let's just pivot to that RRF. And I know you've got a big restaurant focus, and you heard, Marcy and the outlook. And just give us a little. Sometimes we always just talk about the moment, but what has these programs meant for your restaurants, and how? And tell us a little bit about what you've done with RRF. All these acronyms, RRF.
Lots of acronyms. That's true.
Right.
For sure, we in the accounting profession, we always think it's easy, right? So we look at it, we go, oh, this is so simple, clients can do it. But inevitably, we knew that maybe they don't want to do it. So we created like a cheat sheet or a calculator that they could go ahead and put all the information there. So we reviewed it, gave them instructions that they could do it themselves, or we didn't really have enough resources to be able to help. So we knew that 90% of our clients could actually get it done. And especially if we gave them a tool last week before the program opened, go ahead, get all of your stuff ready, and then get in early. So we wanted them all in early. So the 10% that couldn't get it all together and done and wanting to do it, we definitely helped get that through on Monday so that the funds wouldn't run out.
Well, it's going to be interesting.
I was just going to say, how was their process? Did they actually get their applications in without any issues? How did that go for them?
Yes, especially since we teed them up for it. They already knew what to expect. We already have such a great connected daily and weekly relationship with our clients that we walked them through the process beforehand and made sure that they were ready to go. And we worked with a lot of smart people, so they got it through. There were some that we had to do some hand holding, but that's just because, you know, they don't do this stuff every day. Even the ones that might have some computer issues or not know where to go or just don't have time to do it. Those are the ones we just help assist with.
Well, we're gonna, get into ERTC in a second, but you have 185,000 applications that made it into the RRF program this week. I do also just want to reflect on there's probably a couple 100,000 applications that were in process at lenders that did not get in to the SBA. So that's just it. We were on a call earlier. There's going to be a lot of this transfer of these applications to the CFIs. We've heard a couple of lenders had tens of thousands of applications in process. So I know there's some questions out there. What's going to happen with funding, and there's to be seen. To be seen if the RRF funding runs out. What happens? Do they somehow allocate more? Same thing right now. There is pressure in the system related to potentially 200,000 businesses plus that were in process at a lender that now have been told that the lender cannot process them anymore. So with that, there's some discussion that they're going to work on some other funding, but they're working on a lot of things in DC. So we're at this point, we think it's probably less likely that something will happen, but we'll keep paying attention to it. Lisa, is there anything else you want to add to kind of PPP or RFF or CVOG before we move on to ERTC?
What's interesting is with RRF, we don't know the dollar amount that was applied for yet. So we don't have a good sense as to how much money is still left in that program. So it's just interesting that, with PPP, they were trying to give weekly updates. So hopefully we'll get some information on RRF. I assume that they're trying to get through their priority funding categories and then tell us how much general money is left.
Lisa, I just want to make sure you share with us also, there are a lot of businesses that are next door to these restaurants that are retail businesses that they don't have that funding. So the hair salon next door, the retail print shop, those types of things, they haven't been made whole like this. So are any of those things coming down where it's not only the restaurants?
At this point, I'm not hearing anything about relief for other business categories. I think if anything does come out, it's going to be really targeted and probably at our very smallest businesses. So those Schedule Cs that maybe didn't make it into PPP.
Yeah, I think that's well said. So let's go to one program that is not as well known in some ways as these other programs, but the relief opportunity is pretty significant. So Travis, I know you've been thinking about ERTC since the beginning of the year. You had a strategy related to delaying some PPP applications. So where do things stand with WIS, your tools and awareness, and what are you finding out every day as you talk to clients about that?
Yeah, we've sent out a number of blogs and newsletters at this point, really just trying to educate the client base and make sure they understand that this program's out there and it is available to PPP borrowers in addition to companies that did not receive PPP loans. I think part of the issue is that when the CARES Act was authorized and signed into law last year, PPP borrowers were unable to also claim the ERC credits. The Economic Aid Act lifted that restriction towards the tail end of December 2020. And so a lot of the information that's on the internet is outdated and stale. So we've been trying to have as many conversations with clients as we can. We've sent out email blasts internally to our core partner director manager group, and we've held internal training sessions just to make sure people have a base level of knowledge to have these conversations with their clients. And so we did have that strategy where we delayed PPP2 loans to try to preserve Q1 wages to be allocated to the ERC in addition to PPP forgiveness. And fortunately, timing worked out pretty well for many of those companies.
Well, talk about, I mean, also this other category here where people are coming in and offering, for 10% of the ERTC, they'll do the filing, and just what you're seeing there. I mean, are they testing eligibility properly? And sometimes these numbers are big. I mean, I heard about a public company today, a big retailer, getting a 70 or 80 billion, not billion, $1 million ERTC. So so if you got $1 million, there's $1 million ERTCs out there. So what are you seeing with those proposals to some of your clients, and then the work that they're doing around vetting them for eligibility?
Yeah, unfortunately, we are seeing clients come to us after the fact, after they signed, engagement letters with some of these consultants, and they are charging fees anywhere from 10 to 15% of the anticipated refund, which could be significant. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. And so the calculations and the subject matter, it is complex. There's a lot of variables. You have to take into account PPP forgiveness, FFCRA, any R&D tax credits that you claim, any work opportunity tax credits. So it is an involved process, and you do have to be diligent. But we are concerned that a lot of these consultants are not checking eligibility. They're concerned with calculating the amount of the refund and invoicing clients. And so we're taking a full 360 approach. First step is to check your eligibility. Second step is to obtain information on the PPP loans. And then the third step is to sort of do the number crunch in Excel, a lot of payroll registers and a lot of due diligence and double checking. And that's been working out pretty well for us so far.
Well, Dixie, I mean, this is it's a big category. It's a complex category. It's something that many firms have just focused on some of these timely relief programs because they're worried about the money running out. So as you listen to Travis, and I know you've thought about this, what are some of the challenges? You give us honesty of your challenges and frustrations you're seeing with ERC right now.
Yeah, with focusing in a client accounting services division, we work with different types of tax preparers for each of the clients, and tax preparers have been sending it back to the payroll company. So clients have had a ping pong effect from the tax preparers to the payroll companies. And a lot like we saw it with PPP, it was very hard to get the information calculated. So it's complex, like Travis said, and it's multi-pronged. So with us, we want to say, we know that the payroll companies may not have all of the insurance information and benefits information, et cetera, but much like they did with PPP, they need to help facilitate this, help practitioners facilitate it. But ERC has been a big thing. So at Cherry Bekaert, there's been lots of applications, hundreds, and seeing that a lot of people qualify that may not even know about it. So, we're anticipating that even more is to come, and that we need more guidance and need more help from the providers.
And I've been talking to payroll companies about how they're trying to approach helping their clients with ERC. And the common theme here is it's complicated because you have these overlapping periods that you need to make sure you're avoiding, because you have different benefit costs eligible for ERC versus PPP. And the payroll provider might not be able to quickly and easily identify each of those individual cost components within ERC. So they're thinking about it, they're working on it, but again, it just ties back into that complexity. And because a lot of the systems weren't set up to track that information in 2020, because a lot of PPP borrowers didn't think they were eligible, so that the fundamental record keeping isn't there. So it is going to take some time to go back in and do accurate calculations. Travis is absolutely right. You've got to start with the first question: is the business eligible for ERC?
So Lisa, I know this is something that we're going to work more on. One, getting answers that from the IRS where there needs to be more guidance, but also tools and capabilities. And when you think about this is probably an opportunity for some firms to partner with others, and there's going to be specialized firms that are going to put more efforts into this, and then to make sure your clients aren't being taken advantage of as these consultant groups, rise up. You could just Google this, and you can see the videos of people saying, here, I'll get you a big tax credit if I get a percent of the amount. So we'll be watching all of this, and we're going to be thinking more about capabilities as well as strategies. So before we just go back to kind of the general open forum, take questions from the audience, Dixie, Travis, anything else that you want to share related to just overall strategies and how you're thinking through things?
Well, for me, it just like the pandemic feels like it's coming to an end and it's getting much better. Same thing with these programs. These programs coming to an end has been a relief, actually. I think there's been a lot of fatigue on firms for sure to be able to handle all of this. But that's how it's feeling for me in terms of strategy. But hopefully new things will come out for those businesses that still need help. I mean, the hair salons that still can't bring a lot of people in, there's a lot of businesses that still need that. So that's my desire, is that I hope other programs come out that we can help those businesses that are in need too.
Yeah, I think we would share, Dixie's comment on the fatigue. I think we're all looking forward to the economy reopening in full and businesses getting back to what they do best. I think it's been it's been great to see how the profession responded to these programs and how we really rolled up the sleeves and assisted our clients and really strengthened that bond with our clients over the last 12 to 15 months.
Well said. So thanks for these insights. And I can tell we've been working very closely with over 1,000 firms that have been doing a lot of these different activities. And every story matters. Every story matters. And you've just made a huge impact. And that kind of energizes us, because there's every day there are new challenges, but it's quite incredible what's occurred. So with that, let's we can continue on here. Michael Strami is going to come back up. We're gonna move into Michael's been out there. Michael's always part of these programs, and I know you've been looking at the hundreds of questions that have come in. So Lisa, we'll kick it off with one to you. We always get this you maybe briefly stated it earlier, but let's state it again. What's happening with those loans over $2 million, the forgiveness on those loans over $2 million?
Not much. But we do really know that now that the application period for PPP loans is closing, the SBA absolutely intends to pivot their resources to forgiveness. So we expect that will pick up dramatically, and we hope that they'll invest in training the people that are vetting these forgiveness applications and making sure they're familiar with the program requirements. So we expect to see progress soon.
Well, let's just stay on the forgiveness topic. So this, Dixie or Travis, either one of you can grab this, and I'll maybe comment. Why do you want firms to help with Schedule C clients on forgiveness versus doing on their own? I mean, everything it's a client by client decision here. And yes, some of the process for a Schedule C forgiveness is pretty simple, but guess what? Some of them are going to want to outsource that work to a firm. And how do you see that, Travis and Dixie? A client do it versus a firm. One thing I think is important is make sure they apply for forgiveness and don't have this, something that sits over them.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember there is no automatic forgiveness, to your point. So we do want to make sure they apply for loan forgiveness, but we also want to verify that the Schedule C received the proper loan amount. You're unable to apply for forgiveness for excess loan amounts. And so we want to make sure that they apply for the loan amount and receive the proper amount and make sure that they have their paperwork in order before they go for forgiveness.
Yeah, most of our clients like to do what they do best and leave that administrative accounting stuff to us. We have all that at our fingertips, and so they really enjoy us doing it instead of them to make sure it's right. So it's a little bit like a trainer when you're doing exercise. You know how to do all the exercise, right, but sometimes you need a trainer, and that's how I feel that clients think about us with forgiveness, we just soon have you there with us, make sure it's done right. We don't want to do something incorrect, have to fix it later, or it be wrong or not be forgiven. So that's just the relationship we have with clients.
I'll say something broadly about the Schedule Cs, and this is something that has occurred over the past month. Unfortunately, due to some of the controls or processes put in place by the SBA, the fact that they could use a Schedule C draft return, there's been a lot of Schedule Cs applications into some of these broad lenders out there that have been fully vetted. So that's one thing. Just be careful when you just take a look. If it's not one of your clients, take a look at the situation because there are definitely inflated Schedule C applications that have been submitted to the SBA. And one thing you'll see even on those charts, the charts earlier we showed, the lending charts, just because you have an E-Tran number doesn't mean that the lender is going to move forward and finalize the payment. There's a little bit of just review. One thing the lenders have done is they've put checks and balances in place. I mean, if you look at the EIDL program, the fraud rates are much higher. So there is checks and balances, and there are cases now that a lot of the lenders for the Schedule C applications are requiring borrowers to do additional steps to demonstrate that they actually have that business activity. Michael?
Hey, Eric, one question that maybe for the group that I know.
Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
One question maybe for the group that's come in is that how hard that forgiveness deadline is. If it passes, is there still an opportunity to go ahead and file, or you have to absorb the loan at that point?
Start making the payments. Lisa?
Can I take that one?
Yes.
So basically, the payments begin 10 months after a 24-week covered period. So regardless of what the borrower is actually going to use as their covered period, the lender doesn't know that. So the lender is going to assume that the covered period is 24 weeks. Payments begin 10 months after that date. But there's no deadline to apply for forgiveness, except before you pay off the loan or the maturity of the loan, which is generally 5 years. So if you start making payments and you're like, oh, well, that's a good reason to start working on my forgiveness application, there's still plenty of time to do that.
So there's going to be some late filers, as we all know. The thing here is the SBA is going to start putting more cycles into it. Hopefully it's going to get more simplified, and make sure you got a clean file. I mean, that's one thing. Make sure you do have, as Travis noted and Dixie noted, many others have noted, make sure you've got all the right documents. So I want to just we got a couple minutes. We're going to go through our final slides here, but Michael, Travis, and Dixie, thank you so much. Look forward to having you all on another town hall sometime soon. So with that, we can bring these slides back up. And we've just, there we go. We've got our past town hall series links. We know a lot of people are watching these archives. So take advantage of them, share them with others. Lisa, anything you want to add here on the Resource Center page?
Yeah, really quickly, we've got a couple of great accounting for PPP loan videos on there. So just make sure you check those out if you have accounting questions.
And we still have been doing these bi-weekly updates. We're talking about forgiveness and related to the portal platform. That this is a forgiveness tool that you can use if you used another if your clients went to another lender. So it's just a deep dive into what's going on with PPP and now we'll be talking about forgiveness, those bi-weekly webinars. Lisa?
Here's a webcast I'm really excited about. It is a deep dive into the practical applications of ERC. We talked with Travis and Dixie about how complex the calculations can be. So before we move on, I'll just give you a reminder. You don't have to be the expert at everything. You just have to know the expert. So if you decide that the complexities of ERC aren't going to be the best fit for your time, leverage your referral network. Find someone who does have more capacity, or who has more people that can get trained on this, and get your clients over to them through your referral network. But we're going to give you a lot of great info on this webcast.
I think we're going to see more and more specialists related to DRC, and we got to make sure they're firm-based.
Okay, here's a quick pitch for you. So the PCPS team, which is the home of firm practice management at the AICPA, does a survey, and we just want to know what's top of mind for you right now. So you've got plenty of time to do this. It takes about 10 minutes, and you'll find a link to the survey at aicpa.org, PCPS. This really helps us help you.
And I Lisa, we'll share the results in a future town hall.
Absolutely.
So here we go, a lot going on, and we continue to kind of bring the latest news to you when we hear it via the different social channels. Next town hall, May 20th. And Barry Melanson will be joining us as well as others. You're auto registered, as you well know, and we look forward to staying in touch with you from now until then through our other channels. We greatly appreciate being with you. Thanks again to all the participants. Lisa, thank you, and hope you all have a good end to this May 17th tax season.
Thank you for your participation. You can now subscribe to the AICPA Town Hall series on your favorite podcast platform, as well as watch archives on YouTube and AICPA TV. Tune in for live broadcasts Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.